We have an epidemic in this country, anti-intellectualism. Like, look around for a second. Look at current events. Teachers are getting harassed at school board meetings. Books are constantly being yanked off shelves because a parent saw the word race or queer. Politicians brag about not trusting the experts while we live through climate change, pandemics, wildfires, even once-in-a-century storms, but like every other month. None of this is random. This is a country where one of the major political movements, MAGA, has built an entire brand on hating thinking itself, attacking education, attacking expertise, attacking anyone who actually knows what the fuck they're talking about. And in my opinion, Charlie Kirk was definitely a leader in this anti-intellectual movement. He constantly attacked education. He diminished people's experience because I don't even know from what. He didn't even go to school. He didn't have a degree in anything. And yet he would, my background's in things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. My undergrad was in psychology. And so when I used to hear him talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I was like, what? How does this man have a fucking mic? How does this man have a podcast? But he was a leader in the anti-intellectual movement. But this is a MAGA thing. So today that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the right's war on knowledge, why it keeps happening, how it's poisoning everything from like our public health to democracy, and what the research actually shows us about intelligence, education, and political ideology. Friend, welcome back to Radical Leftist Scum Podcast. I'm your host, Veldet Slimai. Let's get into it. So first, let's just name the thing. So when I say anti-intellectualism, I'm not just talking about somebody who didn't like school. I'm talking about hostility towards thinking. So suspicion of people who study things for a living, mocking book smarts and worshiping common sense as if those are opposites, Or this one, treating nuance, uncertainty, and evidence as weaknesses instead of strength. For some reason, MAGA can't grasp or don't want to grasp nuance to situations, because the minute there's nuance, it cuts down the argument for some reason. But none of this is new. American culture has always had this tension. There's always been a tension between brains and brawn and experts and real people. And you can even go back to like 20th century, right? And you see candidates sneering at what people would call eggheads or nerds. You see it, and actually there was in the Scopes trial. So in the 1920s, there was a fight over teaching evolution. And in that time, the scientists and the teachers were actually turned into villains, corrupting innocent children simply because they wanted to teach evolution. You see it in the Cold War when academics and artists got purged as like subversives for having the wrong idea. So anti-intellectualism has roots here. It's not a TikTok trend. It's not new. It's baked into how power has worked here for a very long time. But here's the key point for like right now. In the modern American right, anti-intellectualism isn't just a cultural quirk. It's a deliberate political strategy. So it's not just like a college is lame, you're liberal or you're brainwashed. It's if people trust scientists and teachers and journalists, our project gets a lot harder. And so we have to make those people the enemy. So why does the right keep doing this? Why is attacking knowledge so reliable for them? Well, let's walk through some of the incentives, because there's things that they get out of it. Experts get in the way of lying. If you want to lie about climate change or crime or elections, there's a problem. There are people whose literal fucking job is to measure reality. Climate scientists with 150 years of data, epidemiologists tracking infection and death rates, social scientists studying crime, poverty, inequity, inequality. If the public trusts those people, a lot of right-wing talking points just fall apart. So the move is, don't fight the facts, discredit the people who produce them. The scientists are corrupt, the journalists are biased, fake news, the professors are indoctrinating your kids. Jesus fucking Christ. And once you rot that type of trust, though, you can almost say anything. You can try to get away with anything. Another thing is status threat. Anti-intellectualism is also about who gets to have status. So in a more traditional hierarchy, like white, male, Christian, wealthy, your status kind of comes baked in. But education and expertise mess with that. Suddenly the person with authority might be a woman climate scientist, or a black historian, or a gay teacher, or an immigrant doctor. And if you're still invested in those old hierarchies, that kind of feels like theft. So anti-intellectual rhetoric lets you say, these people think they're better than you. They're laughing at you. They hate your values. And what it does, it turns insecurity and status anxiety into a weapon. The third point, right-wing media is a business. It needs villains. It needs adrenaline. It needs someone who you can yell at every night at 8 p.m. And experts could not be the more perfect villain to the right. They might use big words. They admit when they don't know something. They admit when they're uncertain. And they change their mind when new data comes in. For the right, they see that and they spin it as like arrogance, weakness, corruption. So instead of helping people understand a complicated world, the media machine says, don't listen to them. They're lying to you. We only tell you the truth. I have dealt with this so many times because of my background and what I do and what I teach and what I'm certified in. If I try to share anything from my actual education and my experience, how fast they come at me about being corrupt, or I think I'm better than other people, or I'm brainwashed. And I'm like, oh my God, the information fucking exists. But they can't have that. Which then leads to backlash. That's a fourth thing that they get out of it. Every time there's a wave of social progress, like when we see civil rights, feminism, LGBTQ rights, multicultural education, there's always some kind of backlash. And that backlash almost always involves attacking the knowledge that made the progress possible. So historians who write honestly about racism, so like even critical race theory, sociologists who study gender, teachers who talk about queer lives existing. If you can make those people seem dangerous, you can slow or reverse the progress. If your project depends on maintaining hierarchy, then honest information is a threat. So you have to make thinking itself suspicious. And the reality is that directly harms our country. Because, there are consequences. It's not just like a vibe or like, okay, sure, a couple of people. There are consequences to this anti-intellectual movement in this country right now. Public health is the first one. We all just lived through it. Public health experts, when we had COVID, as using the scientific method, right, and using past experiences, they say, hey, here's how this virus spreads. Here's what we know and what we don't know. Here's what masks and vaccines can do. And y'all, the right-wing media in their little ecosystem spent years calling them tyrants, liars, part of some stupid globalist plot. And the result wasn't just like an ignorant and nasty comments. The result actually was more people dying who didn't have to, more people disabled with long-term illness or long COVID, and a healthcare system of nurses, doctors, and public health workers who are all completely fucking burned out because a bunch of ignorant MAGA people decided that they were going to protest and not wear masks. And I remember when they used to say, my body, my choice, which is the phrase that is used for women's rights and abortion rights. So they like manipulated that expression as if they were the same, but that's a different episode. But like, that's what anti-intellectualism looked like in a pandemic. It's these people who kept the pandemic going way longer than it needed it to because they thought they knew better. Then we also see it, and we're seeing it more and more now, climate and the environment. Climate scientists have been ringing the alarm for decades. But instead of listening, the right, who, funded by fossil fuel money, by the way, spent that time attacking the scientists. It's a hoax. They're fudging the data. It's just a natural cycle. Every year, we delayed serious action. The problem has gotten harder and more expensive to fix. And now we're living with wildfires, floods, heat waves, and still anti-intellectualism is doing its job. It's giving people emotional permission to ignore the fucking evidence that's right in front of them. We also see it in education and democracy. I mean, when you attack teachers and librarians as groomers and indoctrinators, look, you're not just harassing individuals, you're shrinking the space where young people can learn how the world actually works. So these fucking book bans, anti-critical race theory laws, the Don't Say Gay bills, all of that is about cutting students off from real history, from honest conversation about race, gender, power, and the media literacy skills you need in a disinformation-soaked internet. And I want to emphasize that MAGA, in their war on intellectualism, have flooded the entire media with misinformation and disinformation. And now it's really hard to tell what's real, what's not real. So this is where we need media literacy skills, but they don't even allow that. They don't even allow people to grow in that or talk about real life things so they can do that, because they're fed what they're fed from their Donald Trump or whoever or their religion. And so they block everybody else. And so now they're trying to get people as clueless as they are. And that's the point. People who can't tell the difference between evidence and we'll just say vibes are way easier to rule. Now, of course, I have a background in psychology, so I love looking at the psychological aspect of things like this. My background's also learning development. So this is such a near and dear topic to my heart, something I very much care about. But so let's talk about like what the right really hates and what the research actually says as well. There is a decent amount of work in political psychology and social science looking at things like cognitive ability, education, and ideology. Now, we don't have to get lost in the weeds here, but there are some patterns that are very consistent. On average, higher cognitive ability is associated with more liberal or left-leaning positions on a lot of social issues. More education tends to increase people's comfort with complexity, nuance, and ambiguity. And then what's interesting is the authoritarian movements, like we're in right now, by contrast, they thrive on certainty, simplicity, and us versus them stories. And again, the point is not that every conservative's dumb or every leftist is a genius. That's not true. And it's not helpful. The point is, when politics is built on denying reality about climate, about race, about gender, about economics, the people invested in the project are going to have a problem with communities that care about thinking carefully. So instead of making a better argument, they attack the very idea of expertise. They say universities are brainwashing factories. They say scientists are part of the deep state. They say that journalists are the enemy of the people. Because if those people are legitimate, the whole project wobbles. So what do we do with all of this? Like, what do we actually do with it? Because it is a plague in this country right now. And, I know, look, and I'm guilty of this too. I don't think I'm better than anybody. And I would never say that I'm better than anybody because I have my own things. But fuck, sometimes I feel fucking smug when I see and hear MAGA post things. And I just always go back to that quote where Donald Trump said, "I love the poorly educated." Of course he did. Of course he does. They are the most easy to manipulate. They don't question anything. They are passive followers. And I just see no logic. I see just argumentative and logical fallacies over and over and over again. And sometimes I hate to say it, but there's times where I'm like, God, you know what? I am better than that person because I don't fucking hate on these people based on misinformation like people do hating on undocumented immigrants because they believe that they're all violent. They're not. At some point, I gave respect as much as that I could, but there came a point where I was like, you know what? Fuck all y'all. So no thanks. So what do we do with this, right? Besides feeling smug? Well, a couple thoughts. First, we got to reclaim smart. Being smart is not about having a PhD or using big words. Being smart is about caring whether what you believe is true, being willing to change your mind when you're wrong, and letting evidence matter more than vibes. That's not elitist. That's like, at the bare minimum, y'all, it's a basic respect for reality. Second, building think spaces that aren't hostile. So authoritarian politics tell people, if you don't know all the terms, if you don't have the right degree, stay out of the conversation. Well, we need the opposite. We need more. We need study groups, union halls. We need reading circles or book clubs, people who use Discord, group chats, places where people can, and again, my background's in learning development. We need places where people can ask questions, learn together, and not be ashamed for not knowing. Shame is not a motivator, especially in a learning environment. I always tell people, if your amygdala is activated, you're not learning, you're surviving. So we have to create spaces for people to share, ask questions, and learn together without fear. I know that's it. I have a friend. We do not see eye to eye. He voted for Trump, and we do have good conversations. I'm very clear about where I stand, though. Like, as a gay person, like, I don't care what you believe in. If you knowingly voted against my rights, I'm going to keep you at like a bit of a distance. But I have a friend that I respect, and he respects me, and we have, we're good. But like, we do have great conversations, even though we don't agree. But we also hold space for each other to like talk. So just some things to consider. And then the third thing we need to do is we need to defend the people who make knowledge possible. So if there's a book ban fight in your area, show up. If teachers or librarians are getting targeted, support them, donate them, speak out. If public health officials are being like smeared, push back with real information. That's actually what I use my platform for. So like, this podcast is more just for my personal opinion on things, and because we got called radical leftist scum. But my weapon of choice to fight authoritarianism and to fight fascism is to spread knowledge. And so I create content on my business account that teaches things about like ICE, First Amendment right, Second Amendment right. So I'm trying to spread real information. Of course, I met with the anti-intellectuals who are convinced they are right. And I'm like, it's literally, you just have to research it. And I hate saying this, but like, some people just don't know how to research. One guy, I was talking to this one guy, and I forgot what the topic was. It was about late-term abortions, because he was convinced that people were having abortions at 34 weeks. And he told me to watch this YouTube video. And after I asked him, I said, where are your sources? Show me so I can look at them. He showed me he said, look up this video. It was a short on YouTube by this pro-lifer. She's not even a medical professional, but she was talking to she was like a Charlie Kirk, debating somebody without really being knowledgeable on the topic. And of course I watched it, and I'll put the link in the description so if y'all want to see it, but it's really stupid. But she like used every poor argument and a fallacy. She thought she had a gotcha moment, and she didn't. And I just said to the guy, I'm like, is this your source? Is it, oh, what? And now you're going to make fun of it because it's a YouTube video? I'm like, YouTube is not a reliable. So if you were writing a paper, you cannot use a YouTube video like that. Like, especially if that was your only argument. And then I was like, you have to learn how to like vet your sources. You have to like really think about where they're coming from. What's their intent here? And he was like, oh, so you're saying that because it was in a video, it's not valid? And I was like, yeah. But like, so I try to teach, and I try to like push back a little bit, like learn how to vet your sources. But there are things that we can do. But I also know, like, when it comes to anti-intellectualism, it can win when thinking feels like it's lonely and dangerous. And that's why I also started this podcast, so we can have just like some critical thinking during chaotic times. Like we need just like a home base. And it loses when thinking together feels normal and powerful. And that's what we're here to do, is to feel normal, to feel powerful, to remember that we are on the right side of history, that we are, and don't get me wrong, I know that us on the left, we're not perfect either. I know we're our own thing, but we're not that. We're not whatever the fuck that's supposed to be that MAGA's doing. And they are destroying this country. So we can't be that. So this is why we have to work together to talk about these things, to analyze these things, to practice critical thinking, emotional intelligence. And that's why we're here. That's what this podcast is for. Look, the right's war on knowledge isn't going to go away on its own. And as long as their initiative, their project, whatever you want to call it, depends on denying reality, things about climate, race, gender, power, they will keep attacking the people and institutions that help us understand reality. So our job isn't just to mock that, although it's tempting. It's to build culture where curiosity, study, and expertise are normal, and where ordinary people have access to the tools they need to make sense of the world. Because the real threat to authoritarianism isn't any individual expert. It's millions of us thinking together. This has been Radical Leftist Scum. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who's been told that caring about the truth makes them an elitist. I'm Veldet Salimai. Thanks for listening.